Sorry.
Yeah, so anyway, I'm just gonna go through that, and then there's lots of secondary losses with grief. So while I'm talking, if you think of anything, any other topics, because I think I may be back again next time.
Yes.
And if you are on your discussion, if you have any subjects you want me to talk about, then I'd be glad to help in any way I can. So, okay. All right. Well, first of all, the definition of grief is deep and poignant loss or distress caused by loss. And to me, that's a noun, but to me, grief is more than just a noun. Grief is an action. Is to go ahead and be able to move on, you have to go through grief and you have to move through grief. And it's one of the hardest things that you probably will ever do in your life. But if you can move through it, then you will heal and you'll be able to have a meaningful life again. And I don't know if any of you have heard of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, but she has the model, this 5 stages of grief. And lots of times, most people use that model, and I think it's a pretty good model. It's not a linear model. There's no set way to grieve. People all grieve differently. There's no wrong way to grieve. But these stages, lots of times, sometimes you can be in these stages even 2 or 3 of them all at the same time. But I think these stages are pretty accurate, so I'm going to go through them briefly. The first one's denial. It's shock and disbelief the loss has happened. Second one's anger. And you can even be angry at the person that you've lost or the situation you've lost. Just angry that person's no longer there, that situation's not there anymore. The third one is bargaining. And that's the regret stage. What if I done this? What if I had done that? I wish I could have done things differently. The fourth one is depression, and that's sadness from the loss. And the fifth one is acceptance, and that's acknowledging that the loss is real. It doesn't mean that you're happy with the loss, that you're comfortable with it, you wish things could be differently. This just means that you accepted that loss has happened and you can't change it. That's basically what that means. And grief can take a very long time, which is very hard to deal with in the world that we live in, because we're all in a world where we want quick fixes, we want quick answers, and there's not a whole lot of material and help out there lots of times to help people with loss, because nobody wants to talk about it. And grief can not just be from death, it can be from divorce, it can be from any other situation. I don't know about all of your situations. I assume you're a diverse group.
We are.
So it's just, there's grief from lost relationships, there's grief from loss of jobs, death of parents, spouse, child, just lots of different losses and different depths of grief too, obviously. Different situations, some grief is harder than other grief, but it's still all grief. And ultimately, no matter what the loss is, the end result's still the same. You still have to go through grief. And one of the hardest parts in grief is the emotions it brings up. Because you can intellectualize things, but just because your brain tells you something doesn't mean your heart can get there. Emotions of grief are what's some hardest things to deal with.
Hi.
Hi.
Where's a safe place to sit?
You can sit next to Malia. Malia, just pull the chair over a little bit.
Hi. Hi. And okay, we're going to go on then. One of the problems lots of time in grief is getting adequate support. And I think especially, I know when I was single, you feel alone anyway. And getting support and having people recognize your grief. Lots of times, I'm with 2 different situations, one death and one's divorce, In death, lots of times, especially if you have a strong faith, sometimes people will just say, well, what's wrong with you there in heaven? It's fine, it's okay, you should be happy. And I think what people don't realize is that you're grieving the fact that you're here. You're the one that's left behind. You're here. You're happy that they're in heaven, but you're grieving that they aren't here with you. And in divorce, sometimes those situations, people can look at, especially if it's a bad situation and it's a good thing to be out of the situation. Somebody might say, well, it should be better if you've gotten out of the situation, you're eliminating the grief. And they don't see that leads to additional grief. Because both situations, death and divorce, lots of times lead to financial problems. They lead to a lot of other circumstances, living condition changes, income, your social group, you don't run around with the same friends, just all of these secondary losses. And to me, I think that that's one of the hardest parts of grief is the secondary losses. And people don't realize all the secondary losses that there are. There's lots of them. There's a quote that I read one time, and if we live long enough, all of us are going to experience loss of some kind, death, or other losses too. But I've heard that if you lose a parent, you lose your past. If you lose a spouse, you lose your present. And if you lose a child, you lose your future. I think there's a lot of truth to that. I think I have lost a father. My mom is still alive. My husband's lost both of his parents, and he's mentioned to me sometimes he feels like an orphan. So obviously whichever loss it is that you're experiencing, you're going to experience it differently, and you're going to experience the way that you grieve differently because of the relationship. Men and women grieve differently. Just lots of different factors. Okay, when you lots of times when you lose a spouse, you lose your sometimes you lose the person that is your companion, or if you lose person, or maybe not a spouse, but if you live in the same household from a generation family, be around someone all the time. I think it makes a difference that way too if you live in the same household, because it changes your whole routine when someone's gone. And I think it changes your whole routine in just lots of ways. There's certain chores they might have done, there's certain things that you're the go-to person, and you have a lot of responsibilities fall on you. So grieving that, just grieving change. And loss of a child, lots of times you see the milestones that you see that they never grow up, they never have a career, they never have children. I had my middle brother that lives in Minneapolis lost his 18-year-old son in 2016. That, and even losing the two spouses I lost, I think seeing him go through what he went through was just harder because I couldn't do anything to take the pain away. That's one of the hardest things when you care about somebody that's grieving, is you wish you could fix it to take the pain away. And everyone grieves differently, so I didn't know exactly what he was going through, but I knew the pain, somewhat of the pain. I felt some of the pain. My own grief, it's just very hard to deal with. The next thing I want to talk about, though, is that there is help getting through grief. And life will never be the same again. It will be different, not going to be normal, but you can get through grief. That doesn't mean that you forget whoever you've lost or what you've lost, but you can move through grief. It's just that it takes time, it takes a lot of, takes work, it takes intentional work. Our parts to get through it, and there's no quick fix for it. But there are some different things that you can do to actually help move through grief. The first thing that you can do is to mourn your loss, which lots of times in the world we live in, we aren't encouraged to do that. Nobody likes to see anyone cry or they go through emotion or pain. Nobody likes to deal with that. Sometimes people distance themselves from you because they feel like they don't want to go through that themselves. I think they subconsciously think if they stay away from you, it won't happen to them possibly. Some different ways that you can do that to mourn your loss. And I realize that it's hard, especially when you're a single parent, you have enough time for yourself anyway,
Yeah.
when you're going through things. But just try whatever me time that you can get, just relaxation, exercise, meditation, just anything that you can do that way. Just trying to be aware of yourself, aware of how you feel, try to be in the moment. The next thing that you can do is take care of yourself. Grief is very hard on you physically, too, mentally and physically both. When my first husband died, he died very suddenly. Lots of times if you have sudden loss, it just hits you in a different way. I mean, grief is grief. Both losses hit me. But they were different because they were different people too.
Yeah.
I lost a lot of weight. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, and stuff. So just be aware of yourself and take care of yourself the best you can. And another suggestion is lots of times people will either isolate when they're going through rough times or they'll run. I was a runner. Very much a people person. And I remember at first with my losses, I just didn't want to part, I just wanted to run. I thought I could just keep busy and it would go away. And once again, I just want to say that when you go through grief and emotions, grief is normal, even though it doesn't feel like it's normal. If you can tell yourself, because you can have all kinds of crazy mixed up emotions. You're losing your mind, you can't think clearly. Just all this big bundle of lots of different emotions. Another thing that can happen during grief and loss, people will try to intellectualize your loss, and sometimes you will too. They try to explain it away. And a couple examples that I have down here are, so I have a sister that is schizophrenic. She passed away in 2014. And I know a lot of people said, oh, she's better off, she's in a better place. But she was still my sister. It still hurt. Even though she she is in a better place, but it still hurt. So even though you can intellectualize things, you still need to grieve and get through. And another example would be like in marriage that breaks up, and say in a situation where the person is cheated or there's just mixed emotions, that you still need to grieve because it was a part of your life. It's still a situation. And to move forward, to grieve that loss, grieve the dreams that are gone, grieve what's missing. And lots of times, sometimes when parents die, somebody says, well, they're elderly, they lived a good long life, you shouldn't be sad. Well, they're still your mom, still your dad, they're a huge part of your life. So you still need to grieve those losses and don't let anyone take your grief away. And this is probably one part for me. Don't pretend you're okay. Because I always thought I could be strong. And being strong is being honest about your feelings too. Now you have to find the right people sometimes to go to be honest with, because there are people that will be there for you. And that's a challenge, but usually you can look far enough you can find it. And that's why I think this group here is so great. Because you guys all you get each other. I think that's wonderful. Singles mom. At the time I lived in Taylorville. My first husband died, and I felt like everyone was a lot older than me because I was a young widow. And I felt like I could find anybody other than older women to go to. Not that I didn't feel for them, but I just nobody didn't feel like anybody got me. So I think that's what's so wonderful about a group here. Sad. So anyway, grief is about a broken heart. It's not about a broken brain. So I think that's what we need to remember. And I think sometimes we don't want to live our life completely on emotion, which isn't good. But when you have loss, you have emotion that's involved. And so you have to deal with that emotion. And next, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the secondary losses in grief. And lots of times people, when you go through grief, you can really be surprised by the depth of the grief, the length of the grief, and all of the secondary losses that come from the grief. You have loss of partner, loss of household chores, duties, things like that, loss of income, loss of connection to family and friends, especially, unfortunately, we live in a world that's full of couples and isn't always single friendly, and you feel like you're a third wheel. So that's a huge loss right there, social loss. Loss of physical intimacy, loss of future plans, lots of secondary losses. And I don't know if any of you can think of any other secondary losses that you've ever had in your experiences.
Well, what I find interesting for everything that you're saying for grief, I know we always think of grief as physically losing someone, like a death. But I feel like grief applies to all of us in this room. We all have lost out on relationships that
Yes.
we didn't think we were going to lose out
Yes.
on. And all of these things, all of these stages, we've all been through those, whether it's been the loss of a romantic relationship or the loss of life of a loved one. But I think for me personally, mine is not a death. Mine is a loss of a relationship. And I feel like the secondary loss for me was the loss that my kids miss out on that.
Oh, yes.
Miss out on that family unit.
Yes, that's a good one, because that's very true. That's what my current husband told me, when he raised up his boys, that's what he felt like. He felt bad because they didn't have a mother around. And he really wanted that badly for them. But you're right, and family unit the same way. That's huge. That's probably one of the biggest losses there is. Because when you blend families too, like there's always challenges to blending families. And I know even to this day, I'll think, yeah, I wish I could have my original family back. Not that I don't love them.
Yeah.
But really.
Yeah.
Because you have children from different marriages, they have different expectations, they have, and it's just like, it's not the same. And I'll look at other families and couples and I'll think, man, I wish I could have that. I wish I had the original one where there weren't any questions, there weren't any of this jealousy or all this mixed up, confused emotions.
Because a blended family is more work.
Yes, it is. It's a lot more work.
It's a lot more work.
No, it is. It can be rewarding. It can be really good. It's like my stepdaughter, my second husband lost his wife to cancer too, so she accepted me very well, and it's great. In fact, I think that's like a bonus. She wouldn't have to still accept me, and she accepted Will now too. My husband right now. The kids call him Grandpa Will. So how neat is that? It's wonderful. And speaking of that, that's a lot of it too, is attitude. Attitude's huge. And you have to go through grief and you have to find balances. But attitude is really a lot of it, because you can hurt yourself worse than anyone else can hurt you, I think, anyway. You really can. And lots of times I know when I've gone through hard times, I'll think, do you really want to do that to yourself, Lynn? You already hurt enough. Do you want more pain? I think that's easy to do to ourselves. Sometimes we're already just really having pity parties, and I've had plenty of pity parties. I just say that's enough. Go to me. I'm gonna put a timer on.
Where do you buy those timers?
Yeah, that's true, because I think we need our pity parties sometimes too. But
and how do you differentiate, or how do you recognize whether you're allowing yourself to grieve or you're giving yourself a pity party?
I think, and maybe I'm wrong, but my experience is there come a time later on, and you'll know it takes time, where you'll realize you're at the point where, am I going to get bitter or am I going to get better? At least that's the way it was with me, and I've read other stories the same way. I think that it comes, and I think that comes through death, divorce, or whatever, and I really believe that that would be something that would be real. Because eventually you have to, like the acceptance part, you can't change the past. You can't, there's all things we regret, there's things I regret. But you can't change the past. The only thing you can change is the present. And if you have a future, we don't even know if we have a future, really, but I think that that's it right there. I think you come to the realization that, hey, I'm going to work on this, I'm gonna be better, I'm not gonna be stuck here, I don't wanna be here the rest of my life, I don't wanna be bitter. And it takes work, and you don't just say it one time, I don't think. It's just back and forth. I mean, it's not just one time, just like when you forgive somebody, it's the same way there.
Yeah.
It takes work.
I love what you said, Linda. Am I going to get bitter or am I going to get better?
Yes.
Like, I think that's huge, and I think that's so pivotal that it takes intentionality of saying, I don't want to stay in this place.
Yes,
I want better for myself. I want better for my kids. And I think this goes to, for all of us that have had a loss of our relationships, of the breakdowns of our marriages or our significant others, and of our kids not having their dads present, whatever all of our different circumstances are. At what point do we say, I have to do better for myself and for them? I love that.
Janelle commented on the chat saying that she had to mourn the loss of like her ex-in-laws.
Oh,
Like,
yes,
they
of
no
course,
longer
yeah, she lost that family, you're
consider
right.
them,
That's another
consider
huge
her
one
a
too.
family,
Yeah, you're right, and actually, I went through some, I will say this too, even, I guess I was naive, but even with death, that happens too. It happened to me when Alan died. There was a wedding in the family and I wasn't invited. It wasn't that many months after he died. It's just weird how, the way people handle things. Yeah, and you're right. It's the family. You aren't there anymore. You're part of that family and now it's gone. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard not to take things personally too. I think we, as women especially, we do. You know, because lots of times we wear our emotions on our sleeves and I think that's when we have to pray and ask God to help us. Hey, how can I come out of this situation or relationship better and be the better person out of it, even though that's not easy to do. My sister-in-law and I were really close, and when I got married again, she wasn't happy about it. And she basically just cut me out and didn't even talk to me for years. Hardly. And it's really sad. And after Chris died, I kind of made the first move because I thought about it anyway, but I lived in Ohio and she lived in Indianapolis, so we were a distance apart. And I asked her one time, she said, I thought you were just replacing Alan. I said, you can't replace people. I said, you just find out your heart's big enough for more people. That's what you do. You don't replace them. And sometimes we get a chance to resurrect some relationships. Some of them we don't. I had a good friend at work when Alan died. It was the same way. She wasn't happy about it, and she still, to this day, that relationship's gone. I think sometimes you go through hard times, you discover who your friends are. Yeah, and the ones that want you to live the way they want you to live, and there's no negotiating, I'm not sure they're your friends.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, your family can be that way too sometimes, but yeah.
I like that you really stressed on the point that everyone grieves differently.
Yes, they do, yes. Yeah.
And to accept that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes, I know for me, with loss, even loss of a marriage or a romantic relationship, sometimes you don't know how to respond as the person on the other end of it. So I feel like sometimes that's where distance comes into place, because I don't want to say something and say the wrong thing.
No.
And I don't want to offend you. So I feel like sometimes it's better if I just don't say anything at all.
Yeah. No, that's very true. And sometimes it's fair not saying anything at all too. Sometimes you need somebody to listen to you. And I think too often people want to give you answers in grief.
Yeah.
And sometimes there are no answers. There just aren't, There's things we won't understand until we're dead and gone. I don't understand everything that happens in the world.
I think this has been, I feel like for grief, even if we feel like we're not in the moment of grief ourselves,
Mhm.
but learning how to help our friends or some of us in this group that
Mhm.
are,
Mhm.
how we can help each other.
Mhm.
So I think even this is beneficial.
Mhm.
Like you just said, sometimes you don't have to say anything.
No, you don't. In fact, if you look at the story of Job, when his friends got in trouble is when they opened their mouth. It's true, because they sat there with him
Yeah.
for days, and when they opened their mouth and started saying, "What's wrong with you, Job? Why don't you do," yeah, sometimes you just need to be heard. And I had a good friend at work when Alan died. And I remember she used to tell the story over and over again. Because that's sometimes what you need to do. You can keep telling your story. You gotta get it out. You gotta find a way to get it out. With me, I wasn't a journaler. I talk through things. It's just the way I got it out. I used to go to the cemetery and used to talk. If you can find someone that will listen to you, that's a wonderful gift. It really is.
Yeah, so ladies, because they would be shocked, Linda, if I just shut up and wasn't talking, they would think something was wrong with me.
Me too, 'cause I'm quite a talker, but.
So if you guys ever need it, you need to preface it by saying, Jessica, I don't need you to say anything, I just need you to sit here and listen,
Yeah,
and I got you.
Yeah, that's true, because I know I'm that way sometimes too.
Yeah.
Yeah, just somebody listening to you. You don't have to have the answers, because then you feel like you're being heard. Sometimes that's all we need, just to be heard. Somebody cares about us. Say, somebody actually listened to me. They heard what I said.
Yeah, I love that. When you were talking about the different stages, you mentioned when it comes to anger, that you can even be angry with the person that you
Mhm,
lost.
mhm.
And I feel like it's easy to be angry with if we are divorced or are not in that relationship with our children's father anymore. It's easy to be angry with them. But what if it is a death?
I was angry with Alan for a while. I went through that. And actually, I went through the bargaining. The whole works is weird. I didn't read Kubler-Ross until after it happened, but I wouldn't have thought I ever would have done it. But he died very suddenly. She's like, I tried to talk about it, I didn't bring him back. And weird stuff like that. But the anger with me, my son has Asperger's. He's on autistic scale. So he's always had some special needs there. Because he's a little bit older, he fell through the cracks. There wasn't anything in school then. So I was kind of angry about that. Really, it's like, why didn't you fight harder to be here to help raise Matthew? Because I need help. I don't know what to, all the help, because he was the type of child that you had to push all the time too. And I felt like I let him down right after his dad died because I got tired of pushing. I pushed him to do everything. So I went to the anger, and I've heard other people, talk about that too. But it's funny. You're right. I know what you mean, because you wouldn't think it would happen maybe both ways. But with death, it can happen too. Because I think lots of times we want answers. We want why. Why did this happen? We get angry because we want the answer. But I think if we knew all the answers, it didn't change the situation, it wouldn't make any difference.
It would bring them back.
No, it wouldn't bring it back. It wouldn't bring our situation back. It would bring the person back. It wouldn't. So maybe sometimes we aren't meant to know the answers. I don't really know. But I think that's another part of grief, though, and it's okay to question that. I think it's okay to be angry at God too. He already knows it anyway. He knows what you're feeling. I think that's what he wants us to do, is come to. And if you look at the Psalms, that's what the Psalms is, really. Anger and grief and then praise. It's like a cycle. And look at Jesus on the cross when he cried out, to God. I think it's just, or the night before me.
The night before me,
Yes, that's
when he's
what I
on
meant,
his knees,
Yes, yeah, Gethsemane, when he said, why have you forsaken me, God?
And I think some of us, at least I know for myself, I have been angry at God before. And I think you're right. I think he already knows. But I think sometimes it sits so heavy on us because we feel like even sometimes that could be a sin, to be angry with God.
You feel guilty about it. You're right. See, we talk about in our grief share videos, we have a video series when I leave my group. And we have different topics, and that's one of them, on anger and grief and guilt. And I think it's like everything else, like kind of what you were talking about earlier. When do you know when it's time? I think it's the same way with being angry at God. If you're angry at God for years and you're stuck and it's making you bitter, that's when you need to realize things need to change. Because when it starts affecting you and holding you back, it's not good. It's not healthy. It's toxic.
And I think you're so dead on about it takes intentional work. Like it's
Oh,
not a quick,
yes.
there's not a
Yeah,
quick
I think it
fix
does.
for grief. There's no time limit.
Mhm,
There's no time frame that you have to check everything off.
mhm. No,
But I think it does take the recognition that you don't want to be stuck in that place and then actually putting in the work.
Mhm.
Yeah.
yeah, that's true. I know.
Even before that, you go through the phase where you also need to know that it's okay to not be okay.
Yeah.
That's true. That's very good.
Like,
You're right. Because
You find shame, especially as a single parent, because, well, for me, as a single parent, because when you take your time to grieve or you take your time to go through something, you're taking that time away from time you should be doing laundry or something with your kids or something like that. Like, it's hard to realize as a person who is always in control of everything and has to be, as a single parent, that it is okay
yes, it
to
is.
not be okay.
Yeah,
Like, to
you're
let
right.
yourself not be okay for a minute.
That's very true. And you know what? I think that way too, even any parenting situation, we've gone through a lot of stuff with my youngest stepson. He had a DUI and lost his car, just went through lots and lots of things. And I think as a parent, lots of times you want to rescue your kids, but sometimes it won't turn to God to do that either. And I really learned that too. Going through situations like that, it's okay not to be okay. It's okay, to not be that way. Because I don't think, we can't, even our children, we can't fix our children. We can't fix, we can't fix, other people in our lives, relational situations. The only person that we can change is ourselves. We can't change other people.
And I think in giving ourselves as single moms the time to heal ourselves and even just to sit in our grief and like you said, mourn your loss.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of it. I know with me, I like to take long walks and even just that, on the trail. That's where I do my best thinking, just, releasing things,
just writing down what you said about it. We always rescue our kids. They never learn to turn to God for help. That's,
Yeah,
it was
very
like one
good.
of
I read
those
a book on
moments.
boundaries for, the stepchildren, and things like that, And I thought that is so true because they won't turn to God if you don't.
Janelle agrees with you about long walks.
Oh, good, good. Yeah, I love that.
And I think in giving ourselves that time to really sit in our grief and mourn our loss and take that time and be in that moment, in the end game, that's gonna help our kids more than being right
That's
there in
very
front
true.
of them
You're
at all
right.
times.
You're right, because if they don't have a parent that's going through healing, then unfortunately that pattern can just keep going.
Yeah.
We don't intentionally do that, but you're right. That's very true. Yeah, because we want our children to have healthy relationships too, and it's hard.
It is hard, and I feel
It's
like,
really hard.
I mean, that was such, Linda, that's huge for me. About rescuing work because I'm newer in my faith than a lot of people here, and that was my catalyst into jumping into my faith and really developing it was because of my kids. And so I've always been a firm believer, if I do the work, if I'm doing the work to get deep into my faith, they're learning by my actions. And so that makes sense too when they mess up. Like they have to learn to put in the work themselves too.
That's true. That's very true.
For their own faith. Oh. That was my moment for the night.
Well, good.
Yeah, that was wonderful. Do you have anything else you want to share with us for this week? Or does anyone have any other questions for Linda?
I just wanted to say also, I feel like something you grieve too is like the loss of who you were.
Oh,
Like,
yes,
who
very
you
definitely.
were.
Who are you now?
You
Yes.
define yourself
No.
by your
The loss of what
relationships,
you've
and,
No, that's very true. You're right.
like the way you are, how you carry about life, how you do things. And then when something changes with either death or a loss of a relationship, you become a completely different person. You almost have,
Oh,
to, I mean, you're
yes.
still you, but you almost have to like find a way to reinvent yourself.
You
I
do.
feel like,
That's very
so that
true.
you can
Yes.
become better.
Yes, you have to.
And that's difficult.
It is, it's very difficult. I think lots of times, when you go through, loss or relationships, either way, death, divorce or whatever, what you said, when you're trying to find yourself again, it is very difficult. But I think eventually you have to find who yourself is to even go on to have more successful relationships later on. You gotta figure out who you are. You gotta heal the broken parts.
Because who you may
We
have
all have
been,
broken parts, you know?
who you may have been in that relationship may not be who you truly are.
No, and I'm not the same person. I'm a completely different person. I just think I'm a better person. I think I've grown a lot because I used to look at other people to go through things. And I think, oh, that's like, and I just go home, forget about it, you know? And I just felt horrible. Later on, when I realized, why didn't I get those kinds of things? And I remember when I got married again, my second husband was talking, he goes, why didn't you think it could ever happen to you? And I thought, that's right. Why did I not think it could ever happen to me? So I think that's another thing sometimes we think too. We think if we're Christians or we're good, then bad things aren't going to happen to us. We have misconceptions of God.
Or like,
Because he didn't promise us that. He just promises that he'd always be there for us, but he didn't promise an easy life.
Yeah.
I mean, I think all of us would love to have easy lives. I would, and I'm human. If I sit here and tell you if I had a choice, would I choose to go ahead and go through and lose 2 spouses again? No, I don't think I would. But there's a part of me also knows that I'm a better person. That I've let it grow me. I've let it change me. I'm a lot more empathetic. I'm a lot deeper person. It's changed what's important to me in life. When Alan passed away, I was studying to be a CPA, and I wanted to move the ladder and go up the top and all, and that just changed me completely. I mean, I'm an auditor at the state. I still use my accounting, but the drive, it just went somewhere else. Because in the end, that's not what matters. And then what matters is relationships. It matters what people think about you. How did you affect them? What do they think when you're gone? What difference did you make in your life? That's what matters. To me anyway, leaving a legacy for your children, for other people, your friends. I think that's what's been so hard in this pandemic is we're also disconnected. And that's another grief too. That's more grief.
yeah,
It really is. I know when the pandemic first hit, a lot of people struggling because they feel so isolated. And I think it made me go back to where I felt in the very beginning, live in the moment. I think when you get overwhelmed, live in the moment. Because really, we don't never know. None, what the guarantees are anyway. Live in the moment. Make the most of that moment. And don't think too far ahead because then it can get too overwhelming. How am I going to get through this? How am I going to get through that? You'll get there, just live in the moment.
so Linda's gonna join us next week also. So is there anything, I'm not like a spoiler alert or anything,
No,
but
okay.
anything you want us to start thinking about that we?
Well, that's why I was wondering if you guys had any certain topics, like just more that you want me to elaborate on, like
Ooh.
bring some more information on. That's what I thought I'd do next time.
Okay,
I just, because I just want to talk about grief, just the kind of broad view of it. But if there's certain topics, things you've really struggled with, like loneliness or depression, or just different things, that maybe I could come along and give you some
See,
pointers.
all of the above.
I know, yes, I think that's the hardest part. Is the loneliness, at least it was for me.
We have Jenny and Krista have said depression
Oh,
for
yes,
theirs.
yes, definitely, yes, okay.
And she's related as well.
I think loneliness and depression, I mean, I think those are both really good times, especially going into like holidays and stuff.
Oh, yes, I
Things are
know.
so crazy.
I still
and
get a little
different.
sad around the holidays, to be honest with you. I mean, better than I used to be. Yeah, you're right, because there's just a lot, I mean, there's so much pressure on the holidays anyway, to make things perfect for your children. Have perfect, this is perfect, it's, I think sometimes we have such big expectations that we have to live up to, and I will say one thing, I think right now, when I lost my second husband, Rick Warren, I don't know if any of you guys are readers, read Purpose Driven Life,
Yeah.
Purpose Driven Christmas is an excellent book. It's really good. It's an easy book to read. It's not very big. I know you can still probably order off a thrift book site or somewhere, or on Kindle or something, but it takes you back to what Christmas really means. That really helped me a lot. The other thing I'm looking at, you guys have ever read Sheila Walsh's books? You're talking about not be okay. That's some of her titles. She's very good too. She's been.
I've seen that.
Yeah, she's a speaker. She's from Scotland. She lost her dad when she was 3 or 4 years old. I think he had a brain aneurysm or something. And right before he died, I don't know if he was chasing after her. Anyway, she blamed herself for his death for years. She's dealt a lot with depression, anxiety. Her material is very good too. She has a blog, podcast too. She's another good one.
Jenny says, explaining grief to your kids,
Oh,
how to let
yes.
them know it's okay that mommy is sad or that they are
Yes,
sad.
Yes, yes, that's hard to do. Yeah, because children grieve differently than we do too, depending on their age. My son was old enough, he grieved more like an adult, kind of. Except for he had a lot of anger and wouldn't talk and wouldn't be able to express it. I think sometimes with children, I know they'll act it out in playtime. Sometimes drawing pictures, things like that, yeah. Yeah, that's how they express grief. Lots of times they express it differently. And obviously, I'm not a counselor. I have a little bit of background. I had a double major. I have some psychology in my background too, along with county, which has helped some. But if you get to the level where you're so depressed, obviously, if you feel suicidal, then you need to get help. Go to a counselor. Counseling can really help. I went to a counselor after Alan died, a short time.
I think this is a good starting point, and to know that Hope now offers grief care.
Oh, yes,
here.
yes, and you guys, any of you are ever welcome to come. Right now, we meet on Thursday nights. We start at, we go from 6:30 to 8.
Where at?
We have videos here. Yeah. Yeah, and we meet in the first room when you come in. But I can't,
The
the
Connection Center.
yeah, Connection Center. Yeah,
They're changing all the room names,
Yeah.
so I don't even know if that's the same room.
yeah. And we have a video series. It's called Grief Share. It's really good. And most of the videos, this is the 3rd series, they updated. There's a few things in some of the videos I don't always agree with, but you don't always agree with everything you see anyway. But it's
Jenny
a
said he
good
wants to
series.
know when the next session starts.
Okay, well, right now, we're still meeting. So, and people are welcome to come
It's not
anytime.
like a thing you sign up for, it's just
No,
open
no,
anytime.
no. Now, you can sign up through the whole app if you want to, but no. We're gonna meet, I think, for another 2 or 3 weeks, and we'll probably start again in February, but people are welcome to come at any time. I've had people show up lots of different times and we
And you feel,
support groups, yeah. Yeah, and then lots of times people go through it more than once too, because, even me, when I see these videos, I think, I don't remember that in the video, because there's just so much stuff to unpack.
So a while ago, you were talking about like people's approach and responses, like what's an appropriate thing to say to somebody that's going through with that, and what's an appropriate response?
I think that,
Like, how are you? Like,
I
what am I
know,
supposed to say to that?
I know, it's so hard.
Great.
It's hard, and I always do
Yeah.
that, wrong, and I think people really,
I always say, wait for
I think
parents.
most of the time people really realize your intentions, most of the time when I think about it, because we've all been in awkward situations.
People do, but you don't want to be like. a
No,
bitch
I
about
know.
it Either.
I think the best thing you can say is, I care. And that's about it, I care. I'm sorry, I care, because most of the time when you start down routes, and I even have to watch this myself, because I know I've got a lot of good knowledge to give, but I don't want to talk too much and people, coming across as like, oh, I'm just gonna talk about my grief, because that's not why I do it, it's because I want to try to help people. But a lot of it is just, I care. I can't change your situation, I wish I could, but I care.
Jenny also said that she thinks it's important if you're going to say, I'm here for you, to actually mean it.
Oh, yes, that's very true, and people lots of times don't, unfortunately. They
What's the
want
problem?
to let you down.
What's an appropriate response to somebody that's like, how are you doing? Or-
That's asking, so if you're
Yeah.
the one grieving, and
Yeah,
somebody's asking like, how are
because
you
people
doing?
like right now, people do that to me all the time. I'm like, what do you want me to like
No.
say to that?
Yeah.
I'm fine.
You know what? I
How are
think
you?
I'd be honest.
That's what I agree.
That's exactly what I would do. And if they can't handle it, then they'll.
Don't come back.
No, really, I think too often we don't, and I
That's a
really
lot of
think that's
baggage.
part- I think that's part of the reason, I think that's part of the reason why people, you know. Run away, but I
Do
know,
people really want to know though? You know,
no,
like,
that's true, and some of them don't, and I think that part of
They
it
just
is,
don't know what to
that's where you have to
say.
pick and choose. I
Yeah.
think you can, eventually you can feel people out, and sometimes you can kind of tell if they really care, or if you think it's somebody you're comfortable with. And sometimes you'll find out that person might not be the person that you're supposed to talk to. And just keep looking, don't give up. And actually, when Chris died, I was in Ohio and I was out there and pretty much by myself. I didn't have my stepdaughter, but I didn't have a whole lot of people I could go to. I just started calling people. And invited myself to some of my friends because I knew that I needed to get back on my feet again. And you know the people that are good friends that eventually, you know.
Right. It just seems like right now, everywhere I go, like people are running to, how are you doing? You okay? Like, I don't need a pity party. I don't want you feeling sorry.
No, and see,
But I
I understand that too. 'cause
But
I-
it's people
you
like
don't want a pity
genuinely
party, but you
care.
want
I
people
just
to
don't think we do.
recognize what you've been through, and it's hard, yeah.
Yeah, what do you say? Especially like COVID, you don't see people all the time, then so it's been months, and then you see people and like, oh, I heard. Fine, dude. Like, what do you say? I don't know
Yeah.
what to say.
I guess just, I
Weird.
don't know, unless you just said thanks or whatever, I mean, and it's funny too, sometimes people say stuff to you, and it will bother you also, somebody else will say the same thing to you and it'll make you cry. You know,
Or make you mad.
you're right, or whatever, you're right, everything, because you don't know what you're grieving, it's weird, you know?
I think thanks is a good response, because
Yeah.
if you know it's someone, they genuinely care, but you don't feel like you have, I mean, you don't wanna lie to them if you're
No.
not okay. But like you said, you don't wanna just unleash all this on everybody.
No, that's very true. You have to pick and choose. Yeah, you said you gotta pick and choose. Not because you're wrong being honest sometimes, but you gotta be careful you pick and choose because they can end up hurting you first.
Today's a bad day. Do you need me to elaborate?
That's true. That's a good one right there, really, tell you the
Is
truth.
that, yeah, today's a good day.
Today's a good day or today's a bad day?
Yeah,
I've said that.
'Cause I
yeah,
can
we're supposed to say
imagine-
today's a bad day, pray for me. Isn't that what we're supposed to do anyway? We're supposed to pray for each other. Let's care about each other, but you're right. But it's hard to pick and choose. Who to talk to. And what to say. And actually, we talked about that in the videos too, the video series. It talks about telling people how you feel. Talks about writing grief letters too, and hey, I might, which I don't think is too bad of an idea, I just never was one to write, but yeah, write a letter and saying, this is where I'm at right now. Please respect this. I'm not gonna be who you want me to be for a while.
Like the last big significant loss, like I went through was like my mom passing, and people would be like, how are you? Or whatever, like, what am I supposed to say? Or they'd say, I'm sorry. And that like made me so mad. Like, you didn't do nothing. Stuff. Why are you And that's what I said to everybody, like, you wanna see me get mad, like, why are you apologizing to me? Like, I'm so sorry.
No, and I get
Why
that,
are you
because sometimes you feel like when somebody says something like that, well, how are you doing? Well, and you feel like saying, well, how do you expect me to be doing? My mom just died.
Right, exactly.
No, really, and you do feel like saying those kinds of things, but you don't want to
No.
chase people either, because I think what helped me with that was realizing the things I used to say to people.
Mm.
I always try to remember that. Now, I let people down and try to be forgiving to people, because sometimes it's very hard to be forgiving to people.
Right, well, yeah, and I'm good at forgiving, I just don't wanna be rude,
No,
you know, cause I know it's out of.
No, same
care.
here, but it's just very hard, and it's hard to see other people go on to with their lives after loss, with their family members. Until it hits you on the level that's hitting you, and I realized, well, I probably wasn't there for them either when they went through everything. Because unfortunately, until we go through things, lots of times, we don't get it.
That's true.
Yeah, we don't get it. It's easy for us to tell other people how to raise children, we don't have any children. Or lots of things, lots of times we think we have, and included have lots of answers, and lots of times we don't have those answers, all of them.
Jenny says, you can always say I'm doing well considering the situation, or I'm working through it.
Yeah, that's true, that's good. That's good. It's very true.
All right. Well, Linda, we thank you.
You're
Thank you
welcome. I
very
hope this helps
much.
some, yeah, so thank you.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
and we will see you next week.
Yeah, and if you have any topics after I leave, you know, that you want to come up and let me know about, Jessica, okay? I'd be glad to talk about anything, you know. And recommend, like, if you're in the family, you guys like to read, things like that. I've always
Yeah, I
been a
think
big
that's
reader, that
great.
helped me a lot.
Thank you very
Okay,
much.
you're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you.
So it stopped raining out there, so you don't get too.
I know, I thought it was
Really
really pouring, wasn't it?
Yeah.
For a while. I was like, oh.
I'm gonna stop the recording, ladies, because I had a heck of a time trying to edit the last one last